Hey, it's Tuana with Guiding Principles Bible Study. Welcome to Friday Night Bible Study. So excited to see you. Let's get moving, shall we? There's only one Jesus, the true Jesus who actually exists. But I want you to understand that the world has created a second Jesus, and he's known as the white Jesus. Tonight, what we're going to talk about is the difference between the true living and breathing Jesus the Christ who walked the planet and is the only begotten Son of God, and the man-made created white Jesus. Let's get started, shall we? To understand the real Jesus, here's the thing I want you to understand. The Father decided after the fall of Adam that somebody needed to save humanity. And Jesus, who already was around, volunteered to come down and take care of it. He knew that he was going to have to be born as a baby. He knew that he was going to have to go to that cross to die. All of this was stuff that he knew. Now, whether he was born knowing that, I doubt highly, because although it would have been inside of him, we all know that when you're a baby, your thoughts are not that usually that deep. That is not to say that children are not intelligent. What I am saying is that over that time, there were things that he learned, and then his ministry started from 30 to 33. But there are some keys that I want you to understand about the real Jesus. So we're going to bring up a slide, and let's go over that. The real Jesus allows you to make a choice, even if it's a bad one. You see, Jesus is not about taking away people's choices. But abuse is about taking away a person's choice. That's what abusiveness is. It's when you don't give someone the opportunity to decide for themselves whether they want to do that which is right or that which is wrong. And so at this point, I want you to look at some things. Anytime something comes in, a force outside of you comes in to force you to make a choice, then what you understand is that you're living in a system that isn't for you truly. When your choices are manipulated, when you're given ways that you should think about things, that's not coming from the real Jesus. That comes from a completely different source. Because the real Jesus will always give you the power to choose. Let me give you an example, a really simple one. David and Bathsheba. Bathsheba was doing nothing wrong with where she bathed. That was customarily in that time where that ability or opportunity was. David made a choice. He chose to call the woman. He chose to have the woman. As a result, the woman was impregnated. Instead of coming clean with what he did, which was always a choice, he had her husband killed. And where she was the number one, the only wife of her husband Uriah, a man that she clearly loved, now she ended up being one of many. David's choice impacted Bathsheba. This was not a time where she had a choice to say no. The king calls you and the king wants you. You had to do what needed to be done. And she did. So David had Uriah killed and left Bathsheba a widow with nothing. David's choice was a bad one, but God let him make it. And for some of us, we go, well, I don't understand. How come God? Because in order for me to genuinely love you, you have to give me the freedom to make a choice. And if you don't give me a freedom, then we have nothing to talk about. If you think you're going to take away my right to choose, then you don't have love for me. Now, because of the nomenclature of the time, people will think that the right to choose means giving up a child or not giving up a child. But that's not, in fact, what it means. That is a very small definition of it. What it actually means is that in everything as a female, we have the right to choose. We get to choose to submit to our husbands. We don't have to. It makes life harder if you choose not to. If you choose a man that you don't respect, that cannot lead, then that's on you. That's on you. You had a choice. Some of you didn't. That's a whole different conversation. But for those of you who had a choice, you chose a man who wasn't really worth following. Okay, now you live with that and you make the best of what you have to work with. Next, the real Jesus focuses on having freedom to make decisions. Do I want to support this man? Do I want to marry this man? Those are your decisions. Do I want to eat steak? Do I want to decisions? Do I want to make things happen in my life or don't I? And so I want you to look at that and I want you to think about that because that's something that we all want in our life. We all want the freedom to make decisions and we all want to have thoughts and understandings and we want to be able to go places. And these are the things that the real Jesus brings us. He allows us to sit back and say, okay, how am I going to make this happen? The beauty of making a decision is this. When you finally make a decision, you cut off all other avenues. And that's what it's time to do. It's time for you to make your decisions as to how you want to move forward. And understand that that's who Jesus is. He will honor and respect your decision, but your decision is going to come with natural consequences. The real Jesus, his people are always the minority. Here's what I mean about that, because many of you will instantly go to color. No, that's a human issue. That's not a Jesus issue. What it means is that those of us who are out here, who are diligently working to tell the truth, who stand against what the religious sects are teaching, those are the people you can start to listen to and go, wait a minute. They won't be 100% accurate all the time because there's no such thing as a person who's flawless. It doesn't exist. And any person who tells you they are always right, run, because they are always wrong every time without fail. But the people who truly follow Jesus are always going to be a small group of people. He didn't have 72 disciples. He had 12. And within those 12, only 11 were actually his. He didn't follow the religious sect of the day, the Pharisees, the Sadducees. That wasn't who he ran with. He shunned them. As a matter of fact, he rebuked them on a regular basis. So I want you to understand that when it comes to the true Jesus, if you're listening to a large group of those mega people, they're not on the right side of Jesus. And just understand that. The real Jesus's goal is to lead you to the Father and not away. If you aren't headed to the Father, you're not following the real Jesus. If you got fear in your heart, you're not following the real Jesus. I don't know what else to say about that. That one's very simple. Next. The real Jesus is not the author of confusion. That is the most important point. When you feel like, when your gut begins to go raw and crazy and you feel like God is trying to control you and he's trying this, that, and the other, that means that the teaching you're getting is completely wrong. Because what ultimately ends up happening is when you are truly walking with Jesus, while there are things that are confusing that will happen, he is not out there writing to confuse you. What I want to give you is this. When you have a record of listening to the Father and things suddenly start to go wrong, they don't work out, they don't this, the thing that I'm going to ask you to look at is this. Who do you have in your life that's causing confusion? Because confusion makes it hard to hear what the Father is trying to tell you. This is something that you're going to want to look at. This is something that you're going to want to evaluate. Because when you constantly have someone in your ear telling you you're wrong, telling you you say these things, but they don't happen and they don't that makes it harder for you to hear from the Father. Jesus is not the author of confusion. When the two of you or the three of you or whoever, however many are in your group, can't sit down and have a reasonable conversation, you're not dealing with somebody who's of Jesus. You're dealing with somebody who is of their father, the devil, because there's only two ways you can go. You can only go with the Father. You can only go with the demon. There is no middle ground. You don't get to serve you. You're going to serve one or you're going to serve the other. And that's just the way that it is. Let's move forward because I want to talk to you briefly about what the white Jesus looks like, because the white Jesus is based off of an ability to manipulate people. And when times were hard, way back in the 1800s, they were really hard, contrary to what people have told you, because you didn't have the same level of insulation, you didn't have the same level of housing, you had all these things coming against you, and the elements were really hard to survive. And so what would happen is that people wanted to be able to have control over the people that were in their area. And so what they did was they realized that as they stood at this pulpit, if they created this image of a very angry God who was constantly looking to throw you into the pits of hell, to destroy you completely, and without apology, you would behave. And that was what they brought to the table. And so this white Jesus worked so well that they just kept using him. With all due respect, for 300 plus years or longer, 1610 was when King James decided that everybody needed a copy of the Bible. But I want you to look at that. James decided everybody needed a copy of the Bible. And guess what? He made it available. Did people choose to go and read it? Nope. They believed what they heard. That was a choice. You see, the thing is with the real Jesus, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because I think we'll be talking about this further down the road, but I know we did already. When you deal with the real Jesus, and I told you it was about choice, when he presents you with opportunities, choose the opportunity. Because if you choose not to take the opportunity and then negativity befalls you, or you end up in a position where you're scared, you got nobody to blame but yourself. Open the book and read it. It is really not that complicated. Let's go to the white Jesus. There is no world in which the white Jesus or the real Jesus is blonde hair and blue-eyed. He wasn't born in an area that is comprised of blonde hair and blue-eyed people. White Jesus, as created by the white church, is filled with hate. He hates people of color. He hates women. He hates all the things that the real Jesus stands against. So explain to me how Jesus, who said, husbands, love your wives as yourself and be willing to lay down your life for her. How many of you men out there would beat the daylights out of yourself? If you would, you need some serious psychological help and you are not of Jesus. Understand that. There was some movie, I can't remember which one it was, but there was this preacher. He was like a monk. He was with the Catholic faith. And he would beat the daylights out of himself and cut himself. And that's not Jesus. None of that is Jesus. That's psychosis. You need help. None of you gentlemen will sit out there and have some man beat up on you. Why you beat up on your wife? Jesus didn't stand for that. Jesus met a woman at the well, said, listen, you've had 5 husbands. And she's like, how did you know? And he's like, I'm here to give you living water. She was a different race. The Jews looked down on her, but Jesus didn't. How many different ways does Jesus have to tell you he ain't full of hate? And then you go and believe the white Jesus. It's because you ain't reading the book about separation and division. White Jesus divides people. He doesn't want people together because as long as people aren't together, he has control. White Jesus is all about control. Real Jesus is all about empowering. Which one do you want? Focuses on oppression. The white Jesus always keeps people down. How is it that Jesus knew that Judas was going to betray him and still he continued to work to elevate even Judas? And you preach a Jesus that's about separation, segregation, oppression? That's the white Jesus. See, what you have to understand is this. If I can manipulate religion to control you, then I have everything that you have. I can make you give me your money. I can make you sacrifice and be poor. I can keep you where I need you to be. So now I have less competition. Because what that means is that as a person at the top who's exercising the values of the white Jesus, I am deeply entrenched in fear. And because I'm deeply entrenched in fear, it allows hate to have room. It allows anger. And if you ask these people, they'd be like, I ain't afraid of nothing. I just know. And that's what they'll do every single time without fail. But they will always get excited because they get angry when you call them on fear. And so some will actually listen to what I just said and they'll learn to control that fear. So I want you to or that reaction. So I want you to understand this. If somebody has to be in control, whether they show you signs or not, it is because they are operating from a place of fear and insecurity. It is not because they have the strength to actually stand on their own. And these are things that you want to look at. And I want you to look at and to understand, because when you allow yourself to be manipulated, it creates a dissonance between you that the Father doesn't own. It's this white Jesus make-believe nonsense that owns that level of frustration. Understand that this is not a conversation that deals specifically with color, but if you don't understand that there literally is a white Jesus who has been created and endowed with these specific characteristics, you will follow the wrong people. White Jesus honors and encourages lies. Pastors sit up there and tell you, and it changes with the culture. It always changes with the culture. So when it was slavery time, you were taught how good slavery was. When it was time to open up the slave trade, the king of Portugal sent out Gomez de Zurara to go find people he could get as free labor. Gomez came through. He wrote a book about the tribes of Africa, who were the most profitable people at that time in the world. And they decimated the area, took all their stuff, and came back. So I want you to understand that what happens is that Europeans have a history, a long-standing history of walking into Black areas and taking their belongings. And there are people who want to argue that, but history is what it is. You don't get to argue what happened. It is. Deal with that as a truth and move forward. This white Jesus deals with the encouragement of lies. How do I make sure that you understand what I need you to understand? And that's what they do. They tell you what they need you to hear so that you will behave in a way that is consistent with what they need you to behave in. And it's all dependent on what the game is, what the goal is, what the end result is, as to how you will be manipulated. Let's go to the next slide. White Jesus stands only for Europeans. Caucasians believe they're the chosen race. Europeans believe they're the chosen race. The Bible tells you it's the Jews. Like, when did that change? I don't recall reading anywhere in the New Testament that the white people were Jesus's chosen. That's not true. It's just not true. It's always been the Jews. It's been the Jews from the beginning of time. Does that mean that he doesn't have value for the rest of us? No. Because if you actually read the Bible, then what you find out is that within the 144,000, there's 12 tribes. 2 of those tribes are not in the original 12 tribes. One could safely assume or hypothesize that within those 2 new tribes will be those who are Gentiles and have moved through. But some may be white, but they won't all be the same color, because God did not create the color because he hates people. He created color because he likes diversity. He likes people to look different. There are looks and images and things that allow each and every one of us to find what we're looking for in an individual, if we so choose. Next slide. White Jesus is about manipulation. We've already discussed that at length. It's about getting you to do what they need you to do, working against your own self-interest. Next, listening over studying. We talked about King James. He put out a Bible so that you could read it and know what it said. And instead you listen to a man and not the word. What more is there to say? Next, white Jesus preaches hate. We covered all of that. Next, finally, the white Jesus is hateful. You see, the white Jesus doesn't turn another cheek. He gets revenge. That's not Jesus. And that at its core should tell you that that's not who Jesus is. And it should give you what you need to walk away. That's not Jesus. He's not hateful. So I don't have to explain that anymore. He does not look to hate on anybody. So what you'll ask is a valid question. Well, he speaks against certain sexual behaviors. Yes, he does. Fornication, adultery, and sodomy, homosexuality, are the 3 areas that he speaks against. So fornication is sex outside of marriage. Adultery is cheating on your spouse. And same-sex interactions are all 3 abominations. All 3 are worthy of death. With the white Jesus, if you cheat on your wife, it's okay. If you have sex outside of marriage, oh, that's not okay. If you're gay, that's not okay. Those 3 are abominations, and by the Bible will result in your not inheriting the kingdom of heaven. All 3. Doesn't matter if it's same sex, if it's 2 different, if it's male, female, those 3 behaviors will result in you not inheriting the kingdom of heaven. That's what he says. But here's the thing. Jesus lays out the rules. You get to choose whether you follow them or not. You already know what the repercussions are. He doesn't have to beat you over the head with them. You know. Next slide. Praise the Lord. We're back to the real Jesus. It was getting to me, y'all. having to deal with that white Jesus. So, Jesus, he showed you how to walk by faith, even in the midst of great hardship. I do love that man. I will tell you why he did that. Because he knew this world was going to be hard. He said, listen, turn the other cheek. Keep moving forward. Now, see, y'all misunderstand that because you think that if somebody hits you, you just supposed to turn. But remember, there were times that people hit Jesus and Jesus hit back. And I'm not talking physically. I'm talking just verbally, spiritually. Let me give you an example. Nicodemus came in, said, listen, what am I supposed to do? Return to my mother and be born again? He goes, how is it that you know you're supposed to be a spiritual leader and you don't know these things? That's a hit. He told him, listen, come on, man, you got to get this stuff together. Like, your mind ain't right. And then he explained to him. Jesus says, understand that everything you do is about two things: loving God with all your heart, mind, and strength, and loving your neighbor as yourself. You have to be willing to put yourself out there for your neighbor. If we had done that, then people like Paul Wayland and the Republicans he have created would not have a place to stand right now. But we didn't. So now here's what you get. You get a group of people who profess to love Jesus. But I've already done a video on how a Christian nationalist is an oxymoron. You can't be Christian and a nationalist. You can be one, but you can't be the other because now you're serving two gods. If you understand that, then this all makes your life so much easier. Jesus fights systems and people destroying the earth. He called the Pharisees and Sadducees a brood of viper. The system that the Pharisees and Sadducees had created, the religious sect, was no longer something that Jesus supported. That's why you can walk into so many churches and not feel the Spirit. It's very rare that you walk in and you actually get to feel the Spirit. That's why in the West, there are so few miracles that you get to see performed, because the Lord that they serve is not the same Lord that actually exists. So he fights systems and he goes after those who are destroying the earth. That's why you have the crazy climate changes. Jesus calls to everyone, and color is not his thing. Jesus understands this. You either belong to him or you don't. There is no middle ground. Congratulations, you're mine. Congratulations, you're of your father, the devil. Just understand that. And he's calling to you, not based on what color you are, but on whose you are. Jesus is patient and plays the long game. Remember, the Father is long-suffering. We must learn to be long-suffering. Things in this world that we live in, they don't happen quickly. We got that idea because of how quickly technology has moved since the turn of the century, being the 1900s. And again, when we hit the 2000s. So I want you to understand that everything you do is going to require long suffering. It's going to be time. Long suffering sounds like a bad thing because of the word suffering, but it really isn't. It's just about, understanding that everything is going to happen. He brings hope to people who are struggling. Let me tell you something. When you meet the real Jesus, it'll be like nothing you have ever experienced in your life. You will have a freedom that you wouldn't ordinarily have. That's something that you're going to have to experience. I know we've done videos on that before, but I'll do another one. Jesus tells you to take care of the poor and the widows. He knew there were going to be poor people and that people were going to die. Take care of your fellow man. There's never a reason people should be homeless. But when we became more selfish, then homelessness began to rise. That just is what it is. Next slide. Jesus tells you to love your neighbor as yourself, but we just talked about that. We don't need government assistance if we're all taking care of each other. Next slide. Jesus tells you the rules and then expects you to follow them. So why did God let this happen? He didn't. He told you the rules. And instead of studying for yourself and seeing where you could make a difference, guess what you did? You listened to a man. You listened to humanity. That's the thing. You see, part of the white Jesus nightmare is that it teaches you that men are superior. Jesus never taught us that men were superior. Are men the ones who are responsible? Yes, because they answer to God directly. So all that you see happening, these guys are going to get theirs in time. But remember, the Israelites were slaves for 400 years before God intervened. Is that really the life that you want to live? You can stand on his principles for good, for right, or for wrong. Either way you look at it, that's that. You're standing on his principles. It's an automated machine. While there are times that he will intervene, there are equally as many times as he will let the world play out as it will play out. Because at the end of the day, they're not going to be able to say, we didn't know, you didn't give us a chance. He said, every mouth will be shut. This is the evil that you have done. So when you're a grandmother or a mother or a young man and you're thinking God doesn't care, it's not true. The white Jesus does not care, but the real Jesus does care. And he's not going to leave you with nothing. He is going to warn you of what is to come, but he is not going to leave you. You've got to be willing to listen to what it is that he's telling you. Because if you're not willing to listen, you're going to endure hardships that you didn't have to do. It's going to become too late, too hard, too whatever, and you're not going to be able to move through. So why exactly would you torture yourself? Understand this. Your ability to listen and to understand the difference between the real Jesus and to become the detective and to figure out all the clues and how they work together, that's where your strength is. Lean on that strength. Get to know the real Jesus by understanding his word. Understand what he says. Understand his instructions. Understand who he is, not who this fake person is. Because then you can stop asking, why are Christians with Donald Trump? Because you can't be with Donald Trump and be a Christian. It's not true. But you're trying to blame people who don't have any part of that world. I'll see you next time.